The discovery that would shatter my life felt like a knife to the chest, but I refused to bleed out from their lies. My name is Adonis Jones, and I'm 33 years old. Each morning, I wake in an empty house that once held a marriage built on what I thought was trust. Tracy, my wife, convinced me for years that her best friend Cameron was gay, a performance they maintained while carrying on an affair right under my nose. The humiliation burned deeper than the betrayal itself. When the truth finally surfaced, I didn't collapse or rage blindly. I hired Marta Ruiz, my brilliant divorce attorney, and methodically gathered evidence that would expose every calculated lie they'd told. Anyone who's been deceived at this level understands. Sometimes justice is the only path to healing. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I wasn't supposed to be home until after 9. The Hawkins proposal needed revisions and I'd planned to pull a late night at the office. But something clicked together faster than expected. The numbers aligned, the wording tightened up, and by 7 I was done. I packed up my laptop, nodded goodbye to the security guard, and headed home with the rare satisfaction of finishing early. That feeling lasted exactly until I turned onto our street. Cameron's silver Audi sat in our driveway, right behind Tracy's Honda. I slowed down, staring at it like it might vanish if I looked hard enough. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Tracy had texted me around 5. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Yet here was Cameron's car, parked bold as brass at our house, when both of them should have been elsewhere. Something cold settled in my stomach as I pulled in behind them and cut the engine. The house was too quiet when I stepped inside. That specific kind of silence that makes the back of your neck prickle. No TV murmur, no kitchen sounds, nothing. Just the soft hum of the air conditioning cycling on. "Tracy?" I called out. Nothing. I remember the feeling of my shoes on the hardwood as I walked down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was wading through water. Our bedroom door was closed, but a thin strip of light shone underneath. I stood there for a moment, hand hovering over the knob. Part of me already knew. Maybe I'd always known, somewhere beneath the excuses and explanations I'd accepted for years. I pushed the door open. They froze like deer caught in headlights. Tracy and Cameron, tangled in our sheets, clothes half off, her lipstick smeared across his mouth, his hand still clutching her waist. The world tunneled down to that single image, burning itself into my brain. What the hell is this? The words tore out of me, rough-edged and raw. Tracy shot up like she'd been practicing the move. "Adonis, it's not what it looks like." A laugh burst from my throat, jagged and bitter. "You're half naked in our bed with him. How else am I supposed to see it?" Cameron threw his hands up dramatically, his voice suddenly pitching higher than normal. "Oh my God, Adonis, calm down. You're seriously overreacting. I'm gay, remember?" He even rolled his eyes at me, doubling down on the exaggerated mannerisms I'd seen him use 1,000 times before. "Gay men don't do this with married women," I snapped, jabbing my finger toward them, the rumpled sheets, the evidence of betrayal that couldn't be explained away. Tracy rushed in, her voice sharp with desperation. "You're paranoid. Cameron's my best friend. We were just trying my clothes on him, just messing around, nothing happened." "Messing around?" Heat flooded my chest, pushing my voice louder. "You've been lying to me for years, hiding behind his little act. How stupid do you think I am?" Cameron clutched the blanket around himself like some kind of shield, his words fluttering in that fake lilt he'd perfected. "Adonis, honey, I swear you've got this all wrong. Tracy and I were just talking, just being silly. Nothing more. I would never." "Drop the act, Cameron." I cut him off, my voice thundering over his whine. "I see you. You're not fooling me anymore." Tracy's face twisted, eyes narrowing. "Stop yelling. You're making this into something it's not. You always blow things out of proportion. This is why I can't talk to you about anything." Her words hit like knives, but I fired back. "Talk to me? You've been sneaking around in my house with him. You lied every single time you said he was harmless. Every single time you looked me in the eye." Cameron tried one last time, voice climbing back into that fake sing-song. "Adonis, baby, listen. You've got to chill. I mean, me and Tracy? Really? Look at me. I'm not into women. Everyone knows that. My fists clenched at my sides, shaking with the effort not to punch through the nearest wall. My voice dropped low, trembling with fury. I don't care what voice you use, I saw you, I know the truth, and both of you out now. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on, broken only by the sound of them scrambling for their clothes. They tried one last volley of protests as they rushed past me, Tracy hissing that I'd regret this, Cameron whining in that fake tone that I was crazy. I followed them down the hall, watching as they grabbed keys, phones, wallets, made sure they were moving toward the door. The sound of it slamming behind them echoed through the empty house. I walked back to the bedroom, staring at the ruined bed. Our bed, with sheets still twisted from their betrayal. The room smelled like her perfume and sweat and lies. This is not over, I whispered to myself, the words barely audible in the silence. I woke up on the couch with a crick in my neck and yesterday's clothes still on. The digital clock on the cable box read 6:38 a.m. I'd spent the night pacing, trying Tracy's cell over and over until I finally collapsed from exhaustion around 4. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. My mouth tasted like old coffee and anger. I stumbled to the kitchen and put on a fresh pot, staring blankly as dark liquid dripped into the carafe. The house felt different, hollow somehow, like the truth had carved something out of it. When my phone buzzed, I lunged for it, but it wasn't Tracy. Just a text from my boss asking if I was coming in. I called back, told him I needed a personal day, maybe 2. He didn't ask questions. It was around 10 when my phone started blowing up. First, my mother-in-law, then Tracy's sister, then her cousin. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally listened, I heard the same accusations repeated in different voices. Adonis, Tracy's beside herself. She says you flipped out over nothing. What's wrong with you? Cameron's been her gay best friend forever. You know that. Tracy says you're having some kind of breakdown. She's worried about you. I deleted each message. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. By noon, the story had spread like wildfire through her entire family. I was the villain, paranoid, controlling, unstable. Tracy was the victim. Cameron was the innocent bystander caught in my delusions. Remember those summer afternoons when you'd swim at the public pool as a kid? How sometimes the bigger kids would push your head underwater and you'd come up gasping, disoriented? That's how it felt. Like I was drowning while everyone watched from the sidelines, believing I was just playing a game. When the landline rang, I picked up without thinking. It was Mike, a guy we sometimes had over for cookouts. Hey man, he said, his voice careful, like he was talking someone off a ledge. Cameron stopped by earlier. He's pretty shaken up. My grip tightened on the phone. I bet he is. Look, I've known the guy for years. He's as gay as they come. Whatever you think you saw. I know what I saw, Mike. My voice sounded strange, even to me. Too controlled, too quiet. He says you just burst in and started accusing them of... Did he mention they were half naked in my bed? A pause. He said Tracy was helping him try on an outfit for some party. Said you totally misinterpreted. I hung up, then unplugged the landline. By mid-afternoon, I'd heard from 6 more friends. Each one had the same story. Poor, confused Adonis having some kind of jealous meltdown. Cameron was making the rounds, his flamboyant act cranked up to 11, playing the shocked and wounded friend who couldn't possibly have done what I accused him of. I mean me? With a woman? I could practically hear him saying it, hand pressed to his chest, voice pitched high and dramatic. My phone pinged with a voicemail notification. Tracy, finally. Adonis. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. You're blowing this whole thing out of proportion. I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. Cameron and I were just hanging out. He's my friend. My gay friend. Everyone knows that. Everyone except you, apparently. A sigh. Perfectly timed. I'm staying at Melissa's until you calm down and we can talk rationally. Call me when you're ready to apologize. I played it again, listening for any crack in her performance. There wasn't one. They were rewriting history in real time, erasing what I'd seen with my own eyes, replacing it with a story where I was the problem. The unstable husband, the paranoid aggressor, the man who needed to apologize. By evening, I sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee between my hands, staring at nothing. The house ticked and settled around me. Outside the sun set, Inside, something hardened in my chest. I wouldn't plead my case to people who'd already decided I was wrong. I wouldn't argue with lies. I wouldn't waste my breath trying to convince friends who believed Cameron's act over my truth. No, I needed something else. Something they couldn't twist or deny or explain away. I needed proof. And once I had it, I needed someone who knew how to use it. I finally stood up, dumping the cold coffee in the sink. My laptop sat on the counter where I'd left it yesterday, a lifetime ago. I opened it, the blue light harsh in the darkened kitchen, and typed, "Divorce lawyers." The search results loaded. I scrolled slowly, scanning credentials, looking for someone who specialized in cases like mine. Halfway down the page, a name caught my eye. Marta Ruiz, with a tagline that read, "When the truth matters more than the story." My cursor hovered over her name. I made the appointment with Marta Ruiz for the following afternoon. Her office was on the 5th floor of a modest building downtown, with a waiting area that felt more practical than impressive. No fancy artwork or leather couches, just clean lines and a receptionist who nodded at me with quiet efficiency. When Marta opened her door, she wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in seconds. "Mr. Jones," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm. "Come in." Her office matched her, organized, straightforward, with law books lining the walls and a desk free of clutter. No family photos, no personal touches, just the tools of her trade. "Tell me everything," she said once we were seated. "From the beginning." So I did. I laid it all out, the years of believing Cameron was gay, the moment I walked in on them, the excuses they gave, and how quickly they'd spun the story to make me look unhinged. Marta took notes, her pen moving steadily across the page. When I finished, she set the pen down. "Here's what we're not going to do," she said. "We're not going to argue with them." I blinked. What? Arguing just feeds their narrative. They want you emotional. They want you ranting and raving, proving to everyone that you're exactly what they say you are. Unstable, paranoid, jealous. She leaned forward. The more you try to defend yourself with words, the deeper you dig that hole. My shoulders sagged. So what do I do? Just let them tell these lies? No. A small, confident smile crossed her face. You're going to gather evidence. Hard evidence that they can't explain away or twist. Something inside me shifted. Hope. Maybe. Or determination. Like what? Marta ticked off items on her fingers. Phone records showing patterns of communication. Photos, if you can get them. Recordings of incriminating conversations. Witness testimony from people who've seen them together. Credit card statements showing purchases that don't align with their story. My mind started racing. Mrs. Callahan across the street. She's mentioned seeing Cameron's car late at night before. Good. Marta nodded. Start there. Get her statement in writing if possible. And Tracy's phone. We have a shared plan. I can access the records. Perfect. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Here's what I want you to do. Step by step. For the next hour, she outlined a strategy. Not about confrontation or accusations, but about meticulously building a case that would be impossible to deny. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. Clear, specific, and focused. I drove home with purpose thrumming in my veins. I felt for the first time since walking into that bedroom like I wasn't just reacting. I was acting. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Our phone bill was easy to access online. Tracy had never bothered changing the password from the one we'd set up together years ago, when I was still the husband, not the enemy. The records loaded, and I scrolled through, month by month. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, but when I filtered for just Tracy's line, a pattern emerged. Dozens of calls to and from Cameron's number, many starting after 11 p.m. and lasting an hour or more. I remembered those nights. How often had Tracy told me she was just going to bed early, or catching up on work emails, while I watched TV or read in the living room? How many times had I walked past our bedroom door, hearing her giggle into her phone, and thought nothing of it? With a yellow highlighter, I marked each late-night call. The pages began to look like they were bleeding sunshine. I slipped them into the fresh manila folder Marta had given me, labeling it phone records in neat block letters. One piece of evidence secured. Many more to go. The next morning, I spotted Mrs. Callahan watering her petunias. I walked across the street, trying to look casual. "Morning, Adonis," she called, shutting off her hose. "Haven't seen much of Tracy lately." "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." I shifted my weight. "You mentioned once that you'd seen Cameron's car here late at night sometimes." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "More than sometimes. Would you be willing to tell me about that? Maybe write down what you remember?" Mrs. Callahan studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Come inside, I'll make coffee." An hour later, I had 3 pages of handwritten notes detailing nights when Mrs. Callahan had seen Cameron's distinctive red Mazda parked in our driveway, always when I was working late or out of town. How she'd noticed Tracy peeking through the curtains before letting him in. How the lights would go out within minutes of his arrival. "I never said anything," she told me, her weathered hands wrapped around her mug. "Wasn't my business. But I always thought it was strange him coming over so late when you weren't home." I thanked her, tucking her statement into my evidence folder. That evening, I waited until dark before returning to the house. Tracy still hadn't come home, which worked in my favor. I moved through the living room, considering angles, sightlines. Finally, I slipped a small voice recorder, purchased that afternoon, beneath the cushions of the couch where Tracy always sat to make calls. "Talk, Tracy," I whispered to the empty room. "Give me what I need." I hadn't slept properly in days. The weight of betrayal hung around my neck like an anchor. But oddly enough, the purposeful gathering of evidence gave me something to focus on. Something to do besides replay that bedroom scene in my head on endless loop. 3 nights after meeting with Marta, Tracy finally came home at a decent hour. She'd been staying with her sister most nights, calling it space to think, but I knew better. She was plotting, coordinating stories with Cameron, making sure they were on the same page. I pretended not to notice when she walked in, keeping my eyes fixed on the TV where some mindless action movie played. She hovered in the doorway, arms crossed. "I came to get more clothes," she said, her voice artificially light. "Take what you need," I mumbled, not looking at her. She paused, clearly expecting more of a fight. When I didn't give her one, she disappeared upstairs. The sound of dresser drawers opening and closing drifted down. 20 minutes later, she returned with a stuffed duffel bag. "I'm going back to Melissa's," she announced. I nodded, eyes still on the screen. "Fine." Another pause. "That's it? Nothing to say?" I finally looked at her, keeping my expression neutral despite the fire in my chest. "What do you want me to say, Tracy?" She huffed. "I don't know. Something. Anything. You're being weird." "Weird?" I almost laughed. "I caught you with Cameron. In our bed. Now you're staying at your sister's telling everyone I'm crazy. What reaction would you prefer?" Her face hardened. "I'm not doing this tonight." She turned toward the door. "Whatever." I returned to the TV, making a show of settling deeper into the couch cushions right above where the recorder lay hidden. Tracy lingered by the door, her hand on the knob. "You know, you're making this so much worse than it needs to be." I didn't answer. After a few more seconds, she left, the door closing with a decisive click. Later that night, I stretched out on the couch and closed my eyes, pretending to doze off. The TV still played, casting blue shadows across the room. I'd left the front door unlocked, knowing what would likely happen. Sure enough, just after midnight, I heard a key in the lock. Tracy's footsteps, trying to be quiet, moved through the entryway. I kept my breathing deep and even, my eyes shut. She paused near the couch, probably checking if I was truly asleep. Then she moved to the kitchen. I heard the soft beep of her phone as she dialed, followed by her whisper. "Hey, it's me." A pause. "No, he's asleep on the couch." Another pause. I know. I miss you too." My stomach clenched, but I kept still, knowing the recorder was catching every word. "I just came to get a few more things." Her voice dropped even lower. "I miss you. Come over while Adonis is asleep." A moment of silence. No, it's fine. He sleeps like the dead. Just park down the street and come to the back door. I'll leave it unlocked. I fought the urge to spring up, to confront her right then. Instead, I focused on my breathing, on staying perfectly still while fury burned through my veins. Okay, 20 minutes, hurry. She hung up, and I heard her moving upstairs again, opening and closing more drawers. I waited, counting seconds, until she went back into the kitchen. The soft click of the back door unlocking reached my ears. I kept my eyes closed, even when 18 minutes later, I heard the nearly silent creak of the back door. Even when I heard Cameron's exaggerated whisper, "Hi, baby," before they both disappeared upstairs. The next morning, after they'd snuck out before dawn, I retrieved the recorder from beneath the cushion. My hands shook as I plugged in earbuds and pressed play. There it was. Every damning word. Every lie in her voice. I saved the recording to my phone and backed it up to 3 different places. Then I texted Marta, "Need to meet. Today, if possible." She responded immediately. "Cafe on Willow, noon." At exactly 12, I slid into the booth across from her. She was already there, a coffee in front of her, another waiting for me. "You look like you've had a rough night," she observed. I got what we needed. I pulled out my phone and earbuds, sliding one toward her while putting the other in my own ear. I pressed play. Marta listened, her expression unchanging until the recording ended. Then she nodded once decisively. "This will break their story wide open." I took a long sip of coffee. Tracy's still telling everyone I'm paranoid, that I threw her out for no reason. Her sister called me yesterday, told me I needed professional help. And Cameron? Worse than ever. He was at our friend Mike's birthday party last weekend, acting more flamboyant than I've ever seen him, calling everyone honey and sweetheart, practically dancing when he walks, making sure everyone remembers he's so gay, like totally gay. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. "Let him play his part," Marta said. "The more he exaggerates now, the more obvious the lie will be when we reveal the truth." I stared into my coffee. The anger that had been simmering for weeks was hardening into something else, a cold, steady resolve. "I want them in front of a judge," I said. I'd never been inside a courtroom before. The wooden benches reminded me of church, but there was nothing holy about what was happening. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 9, and Marta and I arrived 20 minutes early. We sat on the right side of the aisle, my folder of evidence on my lap. "Remember what we discussed," Marta whispered. "Let me do the talking. No matter what they say, keep your composure." I nodded, my throat tight. We'd practiced this, me staying calm while Marta walked me through the worst things Tracy and Cameron might claim. Still, knowing what was coming didn't make it easier. At 5 minutes to 9, the door swung open. Tracy walked in first, and I felt that familiar punch to the gut. She wore a modest gray dress, her hair pulled back, makeup subtle. She looked like she was auditioning for the role of wronged wife. Behind her came Cameron, and the sight of him made my jaw clench. He'd dialed his act up to 11. Wrists limp, steps exaggerated, a pink scarf draped around his neck despite the summer heat. "Oh, my God," he announced to no one in particular, voice pitched high enough to make dogs wince. "This place is so drab. They need some color in here, am I right?" He fanned himself dramatically. A few people glanced over, then away. Tracy and Cameron sat on the left side of the aisle, not looking our way. The bailiff called the court to order, and the judge entered. A thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked like he'd seen every trick in the book. He flipped through our file, then nodded toward Marta. "Ms. Ruiz, since your client filed the petition, we'll hear from the respondent first, then you can present your case." Tracy took the stand first. She kept her eyes down, her voice soft and wounded. "Adonis has always been jealous," she said. "He doesn't like me having male friends. When he found Cameron and me talking in our bedroom, he just exploded." "And what were you doing in the bedroom?" her lawyer prompted. "Just talking." Tracy dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Cameron was helping me organize my closet. Adonis burst in and started screaming terrible accusations. I gripped the armrest of my chair, knuckles white. Marta placed her hand over mine, a silent reminder to stay calm. When Cameron took the stand, he turned up the volume on his performance. He practically sashayed to the witness box, placed one hand on his chest and raised the other as if swearing a solemn oath before the judge even asked him to. "Mr. Reed," Tracy's lawyer began, "what is your relationship with Mrs. Jones?" "Oh, honey, we're besties," Cameron trilled, waving his hand. "Have been for years. I'm her gay best friend, her confidant, her shopping buddy." He giggled, the sound forced and artificial. "Has your relationship with Mrs. Jones ever been physical or romantic?" Cameron's eyes widened dramatically. "Me? With a woman? Oh, sweetie, no." He gave an exaggerated shudder. "I am 100% gay, always have been. The very idea is—" He made a gagging sound. I remembered how I'd seen him that night, his hands on my wife, nothing gay about it, and had to focus on my breathing to stay seated. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe irritation at the theatrics. When it was our turn, Marta rose slowly, deliberately. She approached the bench with a calm that made Tracy shift in her seat. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to a long-running deception," she began. "Mrs. Jones and Mr. Reed have maintained a physical relationship while using Mr. Reed's purported sexual orientation as cover." She opened our folder and withdrew the first piece of evidence, the phone logs, enlarged and highlighted. "I'd like to enter into evidence the phone records from Mrs. Jones's personal cell phone," Marta said, handing copies to the judge and Tracy's lawyer. "You'll note, Your Honor, there are dozens of late-night calls between Mrs. Jones and Mr. Reed." She walked to Cameron, who was still seated in the witness box, and placed the records in front of him. One call was circled in red. "Mr. Reed, could you explain this particular call? It began at 1:07 a.m. on a Tuesday and lasted 89 minutes. Mrs. Jones was not at work that night." Cameron's eyes darted to Tracy, then back to the paper. For a split second his mask slipped. I saw panic, before he recovered with a high-pitched giggle. "Oh, girl, we were just chatting. You know me, I'm a night owl." He fanned himself again, the gesture now seeming desperate rather than flamboyant. The judge raised an eyebrow, studying the phone records more closely. "And these other calls?" Marta continued. 37 minutes at 11:43 p.m., 52 minutes at 12:15 a.m., 64 minutes at 2:20 a.m., all on weeknights. Cameron kept giggling, but the sound was growing hollow. "Like I said, we talk. About clothes, about shows, about life. That's what besties do." I looked across the aisle and found Tracy staring at me. Her expression had changed, the wounded innocence replaced by something harder, calculating. I held her gaze steadily, letting her see what I knew. This was just the beginning. The judge scheduled our next hearing for the following week. Those 7 days crawled by like they were wearing concrete shoes. I spent most nights sitting in my empty house reviewing the evidence folder with Marta over the phone, making sure everything was in order. "Mrs. Callahan confirmed she'll testify," Marta told me. "She's solid, Adonis. Doesn't seem like someone who'll get rattled easily." When the day finally arrived, I got to the courthouse early. The hallway outside the courtroom had that institutional smell, floor polish and anxiety. I paced back and forth, checking my watch every 2 minutes until Marta arrived with her briefcase and her unshakable confidence. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. More than ready. Inside, Tracy and Cameron were already seated with their lawyer. Tracy wore a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back, going for the wronged wife look. Cameron sat beside her in a powder blue shirt, his posture deliberately relaxed as he whispered something in her ear. When they saw me enter, Cameron raised his eyebrows dramatically and turned away with an exaggerated huff. The act was getting old. The judge entered, and we all rose. After the preliminaries, Marta called our first witness. The plaintiff calls Mrs. Eleanor Callahan. Mrs. Callahan approached the stand with steady steps. She had to be pushing 60, with silver-streaked hair and practical clothes. She took the oath with a clear voice, then settled into the witness chair, hands folded in her lap. "Mrs. Callahan," Marta began, "how long have you lived next door to the Jones residence?" "Going on 12 years now," she replied. "And during that time, have you noticed any patterns or regular visitors to the home?" Mrs. Callahan nodded. "I have. I'm often up late, insomnia, you know. And I noticed Mr. Reed's car would be parked in their driveway quite frequently, usually very late at night. Cameron made a small noise from his seat. The judge glanced at him with warning. How frequently would you see Mr. Reed's vehicle? Marta continued. At least twice a week, typically after midnight. Sometimes Tracy would peek through the curtains before letting him in. And was Mr. Jones home during these visits? Not that I could tell. His car was usually gone. Tracy's lawyer stood. Objection, Your Honor. The witness can't possibly know my client's whereabouts. I'm not asking about Mr. Jones's whereabouts, Marta countered. I'm establishing the pattern of late-night visits by Mr. Reed when Mr. Jones's car was not present. The judge nodded. Overruled. Continue. Cameron couldn't contain himself anymore. He burst out with a falsetto laugh that echoed through the courtroom. Oh, honey, Mrs. C is confused, he trilled, hand fluttering to his chest. I was just dropping off stuff for Tracy, clothes, makeup, girl things. You know how we gay besties are. The judge's gavel came down hard. Mr. Reed, you will refrain from interrupting or I will have you removed. Mrs. Callahan remained unruffled. She looked directly at Cameron. I know what I saw, young man. And I saw you sneaking into that house when Adonis wasn't home, time and time again. After Mrs. Callahan stepped down, Marta moved to our next piece of evidence. Your Honor, I'd like to enter this audio recording as Exhibit C. She handed over the paperwork. This was recorded in the Jones home 3 weeks ago. My stomach tightened as Marta set up the small speaker. I knew what was coming, had listened to it dozens of times, but hearing it in open court would make it real in a way it hadn't been before. The courtroom fell silent as Tracy's voice filled the space. I miss you. Come over while Adonis is asleep. The words hung in the air. Tracy's head bowed, her shoulders hunching forward as if trying to disappear into herself. The courtroom remained silent. No whispers, no movement, just the weight of those 9 damning words. Cameron fanned himself rapidly, his performance growing more desperate by the second. Oh my Gawad, he stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. That could mean anything. She misses her bestie. Don't twist it. The judge leaned forward, his patience visibly exhausted. His voice cut through Cameron's act like a blade. Mr. Reed, enough. The evidence speaks louder than your theatrics. Cameron's mouth snapped shut. For the first time, I saw something genuine in his expression. Fear. I looked at Tracy, who wouldn't meet my eyes. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling. Cameron's gay act, once so convincing, now looked pathetic and obvious. The truth was breaking through piece by piece, and they couldn't stop it. I gripped Marta's arm, leaning close to whisper, They can't escape this. The morning of the final hearing arrived cold and clear. I stood at my bathroom mirror, knotting my tie with careful precision. The face looking back at me wasn't the same one that had stared in shock at Tracy and Cameron in our bed all those months ago. I was different now. Steadier, harder maybe, but also more certain. I'd learned that betrayal doesn't just break you. Sometimes it rebuilds you stronger than before. Marta had called the night before to go over our strategy one last time. Tomorrow ends this, she'd said. Be ready. When I pulled into the courthouse parking lot, I spotted Tracy's car already there. My stomach tightened, but not with the sickening lurch I'd felt in those first days. This was different. The tension of standing at the edge of something final. Remember when you were a kid and you'd stand at the highest diving board knowing you had to jump? That feeling right before your feet left the board? That's what this was. The hallway outside the courtroom had that hushed, serious feeling government buildings get. I found Marta waiting by the doors, her briefcase filled with every scrap of evidence we'd gathered. She nodded when she saw me. Ready? She asked. More than ready, I replied. Inside, I took my seat beside Marta at our table. The room was mostly empty. A court reporter, the bailiff, a few curious onlookers. No family on either side. This wasn't the kind of moment you invited people to witness. The door opened and Tracy walked in. My breath caught for a second. She'd tried to look pulled together, but the cracks showed through. Her makeup was applied too heavily, like she was trying to hide something. Dark circles lingered under her eyes despite her efforts. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging a little loose. Cameron followed right behind her, and I almost laughed. He was still keeping up the act, walking with that exaggerated swing of his hips, wrists limp, voice pitched high as he whispered something to Tracy. But even from across the room, I could see how forced it looked. His eyes darted nervously around the courtroom and his smile seemed pasted on. They were like actors who'd forgotten their lines but were desperately trying to finish the show. "All rise," called the bailiff, and we stood as Judge Harmon entered. He was an older man with a reputation for cutting through nonsense. He'd presided over our earlier hearings, had heard the recordings, seen the phone logs, listened to Mrs. Callahan. He knew. "Be seated," he said, settling into his chair and adjusting his glasses. "Jones versus Jones, final dissolution hearing." Marta rose first. "Your Honor, I'll be brief. The evidence before this court is extensive and unambiguous." She walked to the center of the courtroom, calm and methodical. I watched her lay out our case one final time, not piece by piece like before, but as a complete narrative. "The phone records show 67 late-night calls between Mrs. Jones and Mr. Reed over a 4-month period," she said, placing the highlighted logs on the judge's bench. "These calls, many lasting over an hour, occurred primarily when Mr. Jones was working night shifts." Tracy shifted in her seat. Cameron stared at his hands. "Mrs. Callahan's testimony confirms Mr. Reed's vehicle was present at the Jones residence during these same periods," Marta continued. "And most damning, Your Honor, Mrs. Jones's own recorded words, 'Come over while Adonis is asleep. Remove any possible innocent explanation.'" Marta paused, letting the evidence speak. Then she drove it home. "Your Honor, my client has proven beyond question that his wife, Tracy Jones, has been unfaithful, and that Cameron Reed knowingly participated in a long-term affair while concealing it under false pretenses. The evidence is clear, consistent, and damning. We request dissolution of marriage in my client's favor, with no spousal support awarded." Tracy's lawyer made a weak attempt at defense, talking about misunderstandings and circumstantial evidence, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to know it was hopeless. When Cameron tried to interject with his high-pitched, "But, Your Honor, the judge cut him off with a raised hand. "Mr. Reed, you've spoken quite enough throughout these proceedings." Judge Harmon leaned back in his chair, flipping through the thick file of exhibits one final time. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers. Tracy stared at the floor. Cameron bounced his leg nervously. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table. After what seemed like hours, the judge set the file down and removed his glasses. He looked first at me, then at Tracy, his expression stern and unreadable. "After reviewing all evidence presented in this case," he began, laying his glasses carefully on the bench, "I am prepared to render my decision." Judge Harmon tapped his pen against the desk. His eyes narrowed as he looked at each of us in turn. I felt my heart pounding in my chest but kept my face neutral. All those months of gathering evidence, of being patient while Tracy and Cameron continued their lie, it all came down to this moment. "This court finds in favor of Mr. Jones," Judge Harmon announced, his voice firm and decisive. "The divorce is granted." The words hung in the air. A weight I'd been carrying for months began to lift from my shoulders. I inhaled deeply, feeling like I could breathe fully for the first time since that night I'd walked in on them. "Mrs. Jones is awarded no financial support," the judge continued. "Assets remain solely with Mr. Jones, as per the evidence of misconduct presented before this court." Tracy's face crumpled. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, but she yanked it away. Cameron sat perfectly still beside her, his exaggerated mannerisms suddenly absent. For just a moment the mask slipped and I saw the real person behind all that pretense. Calculating, worried, caught. Remember when we were kids and got caught in a lie? That look of knowing the game was up. That's what I saw on Cameron's face. But Judge Harmon wasn't finished. He leaned forward, removing his glasses, and fixed his gaze directly on Tracy and Cameron. "And as for this so-called friendship," he said, his tone hardening, "the evidence makes clear it was nothing but deceit. Your actions are shameful. Both of you should be embarrassed." Those words seemed to hit harder than the ruling itself. Tracy had always cared about appearances, about what people thought of her. Now a judge, a complete stranger, had seen through her lies and called her out publicly. Tracy's composure shattered. She burst into tears, her shoulders heaving with each sob. Mascara ran down her cheeks in dark streaks, leaving trails through her carefully applied foundation. Her crying wasn't quiet or dignified. It was loud, almost theatrical, drawing every eye in the courtroom. Cameron immediately leaned toward her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Oh, babe, it's okay. We'll get through this, girl," he cooed, his voice pitched high in that fake lilt he'd perfected over the years. But something happened mid-sentence. His voice cracked, slipping from that falsetto into his natural tone. Just for a moment, the facade broke completely. He cleared his throat, trying to recover, but it was too late. Everyone in that courtroom had heard it, the hollowness of his act exposed in a single vocal break. I watched them, feeling strangely calm. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth, and the truth had finally won. "You thought you could make me the fool," I said quietly, just loud enough for them to hear across the space between our tables. But the truth always wins. Tracy's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face twisting with anger. Cameron's mouth opened and closed, but for once, he seemed to have no words. The gavel slammed down, the sharp crack echoing through the courtroom. "This court is adjourned," Judge Harmon announced. Marta squeezed my arm. "It's over," she whispered. "You did it." I nodded, letting the reality sink in. It was over. The lies, the gaslighting, the constant feeling that I was somehow the crazy one. All of it was finished. Tracy and Cameron gathered their things, their movements awkward and uncoordinated. Neither would look at me as they shuffled toward the exit. Tracy's lawyer abandoned her quickly, barely muttering a word before heading for the door. They walked out together, shoulders hunched, faces down. As they passed the small gallery, whispers rippled through the onlookers. I caught fragments. "Can you believe they tried to? All this time, pretending. The nerve of them both." The door closed behind them, and just like that, they were gone from my courtroom and my life. The truth had set me free. 4 months after the divorce was finalized, I sat on my back porch, coffee in hand, watching the early morning sunlight filter through the trees. The silence around me wasn't the heavy, suspicious kind I'd lived with for so long. It was peaceful, honest. My house felt like mine again. I took a long sip from my mug. The bitter warmth spread through me as I breathed in the crisp autumn air. No lies hanging in these rooms anymore. No wondering what whispers might be exchanged when I wasn't listening. Just quiet. Just truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Joel, one of our mutual friends who'd chosen to stay in touch with me after everything went down. Ran into Tracy at the grocery store. "You wouldn't believe how rough she looks." I wasn't surprised. Word had been trickling in for weeks about Tracy's new life. She'd moved into a dingy one-bedroom apartment on the east side of town, the kind of place with paper-thin walls and unreliable heating. Last I heard, she was working double shifts at the hospital cafeteria just to make rent. The designer clothes and expensive haircuts were gone, replaced by scrubs and whatever she could afford at the discount store. Remember when she used to spend $200 on a single pair of shoes? Now she was counting pennies for gas money. I set my phone down without responding. I didn't need updates about Tracy to feel validated. The court had already done that, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some satisfaction in knowing that actions really do have consequences. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Callahan, stopping by with a loaf of her famous banana bread. "Thought you might enjoy this," she said, handing me the still warm package. "You're looking well, Adonis." "Thanks to brave witnesses like you," I replied, inviting her in for tea. As we sat at my kitchen table, she leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly. "I saw them arguing outside the Walgreens yesterday, making quite a scene." "Tracy and Cameron?" I asked, though I already knew. She nodded. "He was yelling that she ruined everything." She was screaming back that he never kept his act convincing enough. Mrs. Callahan shook her head. The way they were going at each other, you'd never believe they were supposedly in love. I nodded, unsurprised. This wasn't the first report I'd heard about their deteriorating relationship. Last week, Joel had told me he'd overheard them at a coffee shop. Tracy had been hissing at Cameron, blaming him for folding too easy in court. Cameron had fired back that she was the one who couldn't keep her story straight. Another friend spotted them outside Cameron's apartment building. Tracy had been shouting, "You ruined my life!" while Cameron screamed back, "You dragged me into your mess." Their secret romance had crumbled into something ugly and bitter. What had once been an exciting affair had transformed into a prison of mutual resentment. They were chained together by their shared shame, each blaming the other for getting caught. "It's sad, really," Mrs. Callahan said, stirring her tea. "All that deception, and for what? They've lost everything: respect, friends, stability." I nodded again, feeling neither joy nor pity. Just a calm certainty that justice had worked exactly as it should. "How's the job hunt going?" she asked, changing the subject. "Good. I've got an interview next week with that engineering firm downtown. Fresh start, you know?" "That's wonderful, dear." She smiled warmly. "You deserve it after everything." After Mrs. Callahan left, I returned to my porch and watched the sun begin its descent. The golden light painted my yard in warm hues, catching on the edges of leaves and blades of grass. A simple beauty I wouldn't have noticed a year ago, when I was lost in suspicion and hurt. Tracy and Cameron had built their relationship on a foundation of lies. They'd constructed an elaborate fantasy where he played gay and she played innocent, and I was too stupid to see through it. But lies require constant maintenance. They need to be fed, protected, reinforced, and when they finally collapse, they bury everyone involved in the rubble. I finished my coffee and set the mug down beside me. The evening breeze rustled through the trees, cool against my face. My phone buzzed again, probably another update about Tracy and Cameron's latest public meltdown, but I didn't reach for it. I didn't need those updates anymore. I didn't need validation or revenge. I had something better: a clear conscience and a future unburdened by deception. Their lie had chained them together. The truth had set me free. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.